Walt, I'm tired. We're all tired. We're up to 4 a.m. watching the election results. If I stumble today, I'm sorry to our viewers, to our listeners. A little tired today, maybe a little rusty, but I'm all fired up. President Trump won re-election. This is the second time in history that we have a U.S. president that did serve 2 terms that are non-consecutive. The first president was Grover Cleveland, who was the 22nd and 24th president of the United States. President Trump will now be the 45th and 47th president of the United States. When the news became official, the markets roared. The Dow went up 1,500 points. Elon just became the second, I'll say the second most powerful person in the world. Where do you see the autonomy markets going now that President Trump is now the 47th president of the United States?
I mean, first of all, I didn't realize that this was going to be a history lesson on autonomy markets today. And secondly, I thought there was going to be like an Illuminati type thing where you were putting presidential numbers together, and if you added them up, it's going to result in some type of number that was going to reveal something. And most importantly, I'm not sure why you were up until 4 o'clock. This is autonomy markets. If you had been following the markets, the betting markets, as opposed to the polls, you would have known much earlier in the evening, perhaps even last week, that Trump was going to win this election. But we're here now. So, this opens up, I think, a lot of different things. Whenever there's a change in administration, this is certainly a more dramatic one than normal. We'll hit on multiple topics, but let's start with a national framework. We've talked many times here about the importance of regulation. I've noted, like in San Francisco with Waymo, it would be great to be able to take a Waymo to the airport. That seems more regulatory than technology. Where do we stand? And you're the kind of the king in understanding how that regulatory framework it could change, whether it's local or national. But how can the feds, Trump, his people, guided by Elon, maybe some don't want it to be guided by Elon, but how can the feds help us in pushing forward the autonomy market?
Level playing field. Simplify that. And to go back to the being up late, I've got to tap on this. You mentioned this, the Illuminati. Nicolas Cage's best movie, National Treasure. That was a National Treasure movie. That was phenomenal. I had to get that in there.
Stay focused.
I had to get that in there. What it's going to give us is a level playing field. And about 3 minutes ago, governors from California called back the legislator to quote-unquote Trump-proof California. And why is that important? Because from a regulatory standpoint, California has some of the strictest regulations around autonomous vehicles and autonomous trucks in the United States. Today, you legally cannot operate an 18-wheeler autonomous truck in the state of California. Under President Trump, under a federal national framework, that goes away, and California has no regulatory saying over what can happen on the roads. It's fairly similar today. Go to California, you rent a car, you drive it to Nevada, it's the same rules. That's what's going to happen under President Trump. And what I'm hearing from multiple sources is that a national framework under the Trump administration will include autonomous vehicles and autonomous trucks. The key is this. The Republicans, Dave McCormick, the race was just called for McCormick, will have 54, potentially 55 seats in the Senate. If Murkowski flips or Collins from Maine flips, there's no way to stop a national bill if the Republicans hold the House.
Grayson, I understand. Everyone understands that there is now a, quote, mandate, right? And you're going to have both houses. So no excuses, I think, to getting stuff done. So the question is, I guess, what's it going to look like? What's the time frame? Every president has a different priority. It feels like last time when Trump was elected, he might not have expected to have gotten elected, some may argue, and didn't really have the pieces in place. This time, I think it feels like the transition team is more prepared this time. How high is this on the priority to getting this done, and what do you think it's going to look like?
This is extremely high on the priority. This is a top priority for Mr. Musk. Mr. Musk is currently down at Mar-a-Lago as we speak. This is the top priority, and I'm hearing it will be done within the first year if they can get through both houses of Congress. And if that happens, we have a regular level playing field. Investors have certainty. Does that unleash, I'm going to use a J-PAL bazooka type flow of cash into this market?
Possibly, right? Because you've reduced certainty. We're going to get to the Elon hating aspect of it in the future, but I would guess that Elon wants to open it up. Some might argue like, oh my God, Elon's going to open it up so much that they're going to let their FSD cars on the road. And there's a lot of people out there that don't want that to happen for a variety of reasons. Again, we'll get to that later. But if they do that, I don't think Elon's going to be very specific of like, hey, open it up. Let's create a framework that opens it up for camera only, no LiDAR. So I think it will be a benefit ultimately to the rest of the industry. But to get to your question in terms of funding, which gets us to point number 2 in a Trump administration, which is consolidation. And if there's an opportunity for consolidation, meaning that large tech companies can now buy some of these startups where in the past there might have been concern about that, that actually increases the opportunity for them to borrow, or to raise money, whether it's debt or equity, more likely equity, ahead of time, because then the investor's like, well, now I have a better chance of an exit in the next 4 years. And these companies, may not fall by the wayside, in addition to your point, which is perhaps more interest in investing in this space. We've talked about national framework. I mean, there could also be some type of government incentives as well, because this is a national interest type of issue, right? This is a form of AI technology, whether you believe in end-to-end or not. We're in a race with China. Obviously, China is an area of focus for this administration, helping the companies in our country. And there's a lot, right? Autonomy, U.S. is huge in autonomy, but not only providing the national framework, but also maybe other ways to provide incentives, could be a part of the new platform. Thoughts on that?
The new platform? Electrification goes to the back seat. Autonomy goes to the front seat. You heard it here first. The only thing that I am unsure with autonomy, does autonomy become a national security issue or does it become a national pride issue? That I'm unsure. But autonomy is going to the forefront. Or both. It could happen. Because if you look at it from just a military aspect, you have various officials from the United States Navy going on the record saying that they are going to invest heavily in autonomy because of the potential threat in the Taiwan Strait. You have DARPA coming, Defense Advanced Research Project coming up, investing in autonomy. So does America come together in a Trump administration and put this together? And let's not forget this big, beautiful rocket. And when President Trump, during his victory speech, told the rocket story again, that was autonomous. So do we unleash the autonomous era under President Trump? And that's from land, sea, and air, and outer space?
We'll see. I mean, and we hope obviously that is a priority in the administration. Third thing, let's get to the third point in a Trump administration and how it can cross-section with autonomy is military. Now, military may not be like, whoa, listeners like, what does that have to do with Waymo? Not Waymo per se, but there's a lot of companies out there building trucks and they're gaining from and having to pivot more aggressively towards addressing the military opportunity that exists, whether it's on the ground or in the air. And I think there have been opportunities under the existing administration for sure. But again, we want to be in the lead. We want to be ahead of China. This has got to be another kind of vertical of opportunity that could change for the benefit of the industry. And I'm just curious what companies you think are probably best situated to benefit in the near term.
On the ground vehicle side, you have Kodiak. They have that very large U.S. Army contract that you have for Terra, which has several military contracts. They could do well. The company that comes of a lot of interest to me is Anduril Systems, led by Palmer Luckey.
Just on CNBC this week.
They got some really cool autonomy stuff. I don't know if you've seen the autonomous drone, the suicide drone, the kamikaze drone. That thing is pretty impressive. And then you have Peter Thiel and Founders Fund. They're continuing to fund this, so they're going to be interesting to see what they do. And then Applied Intuition. They have a growing defense business. Where do they go? And then here's the 10,000-pound gorilla. Mark Andreessen Horowitz, American Dynasts, they're pumping a lot of money into this. This is going to be an evolving sector, and I expect to see a lot of private sector dollars flow into it. And then I expect to see a couple companies consolidate at that point.
I would expand that and say, you've talked about external stuff that we're using outside of the U.S. There's also the militarization that has occurred historically in the police force in the U.S., where there has been obviously a defund the police type of mentality in recent years, but using autonomy even locally or in our own country is probably something that also is going to be of interest to this administration.
It's going to be a huge interest. If a police officer or a member of law enforcement can launch an autonomous drone to follow them, perhaps Skydio, they're doing a lot of government work now to follow them. They can launch drones over cities. They can launch autonomous vehicles for surveillance. Sorry, there's certain times where the police have to do surveillance. I'll just say it, but do that autonomously. Because it's all about saving lives and increasing efficiency, and that's what autonomy does, both on the private sector and on the military sector.
And we have a very large border that appears to be an area of focus, obviously, for the administration. And then lastly, you talked about EV versus AV. Love that quip, EV or AV takes over the EV. I'm just curious historically, EV has been closely associated with AV. And we talk about getting the cost of the car down to a point where the cost per mile is low enough to create a business model. So if these EV cars are by definition more expensive, maybe there's reduced incentives. It's just, I wonder if we're going to see kind of more of a push towards using hybrids or even just autonomous cars using combustible engines in order to push the industry forward, because in the near term it lowers costs, and they can say, yes, okay, over time we'll evolve to EV as part of our architecture. But I guess historically they may have done this to get government approvals in markets, right? Don't bring more engines into our city. But again, new administration, does this become part of the new evolution of this industry, or are we just going to continue with EV and AV are like connected at the hip?
Aces are dead. Deuces are wild. Automated, connected, electrified, shared, dead. The E and the S, they went the way of the dodo bird. Plain and simple. If you look at this from a market perspective, all the nasty things that have been written about this one company I'll reveal in a minute, Toyota. Do they become back to become the king because of the hybrid vehicle? With, you got to stop investing in hybrids and a lot of the different market pressure they were getting. They were getting pressure from the administration. This is the Biden administration. Does it all come home to roost and they end up being the biggest player because their Lexus vehicles, their whole hybrid development program, you can run it? Because if you look at hybrids, Argo ran a hybrid vehicles. May Mobility is running the Toyota Sienna minivans now hybrid. Does Toyota become the big king of the vehicle architecture going forward?
I don't think the king of the of the AV world is going to be the guy who necessarily has advantages right now in the hybrid world. And I think obviously it's going to depend more on who has the best autonomy. And you mentioned that they were partnered with May Mobility. Is that who it is? Or with Toyota, or is it Motional?
May Mobility.
May Mobility. Okay. Well, congrats to May Mobility. They just got a deal, I think, with Lyft that we'll talk about later. But is May Mobility the one that's going to take Toyota to the next level? I mean, they're doing predefined routes, right? They're not necessarily, I think, considered a leader. They are, I guess, a leader, but like not the type of scale that we've seen from other companies, clearly. Or does Toyota see this opportunity where, like, okay, the costs are lower and let's drive forward and let's push this. And this is our route back into trying to gain share back in this market that they obviously have been impacted by.
Pre-election, I still believe this to some extent, that Toyota, through a partnership with NTT, which they have a very public partnership in Japan around autonomous driving, would acquire, perhaps in a joint venture, acquire May Mobility, move the company to Japan and tap into the aging population in Japan and fully deploy that. Post-election, perhaps we can see May Mobility running on two continents. They're currently operating in Japan, so I just want to put that there for the record. I always believed that would have been their largest market. I still believe it. Perhaps they make it a dual approach where you have the United States and Japan. Is May Mobility necessarily the company to take him over the top? Unsure about that. Let's not forget, Toyota also has TRI, Toyota Research Institute. It's mostly a research outfit, but they've been doing autonomy under Dr. Gil Pratt for decades there. And then they also have Woven, which was used to be referred to as Woven Planet, doing all their stuff. And they acquired, bring this full circle, years ago, they acquired Lyft's Level 5 program. So they do have an autonomy program. Could they finally and they bought Renovo years ago. Chris, hey buddy, do they put all the pieces together and finally say, here's all the pieces and put it together and maze that? Perhaps, because Toyota at this point, they really, truly do need an autonomy message.
What you described sounds like a bit of a hodgepodge, first off. Secondly, maybe I don't know enough about May. I definitely don't know enough May, but if it's predefined routes, like I'm a believer in that market. You know, we spent some time with Glideways where you're being an alternative to basically trains, like just the math of taking individuals as opposed to having an empty bus or an empty train for most of the day ends up potentially being more efficient. That's a great market. I don't know if you're Toyota, a large company, I think you want to get beyond having your vehicles be effectively bus alternatives, right? And you want to, the larger market is certainly in routes that are more independent. Now, look, maybe something like May Mobility, it's like, this is just the start. And by doing this, this is how we're going to get into the broader market. Again, need to spend time with that company to understand that. But to me, that is not necessarily the way that Toyota gets to where they probably ultimately want to get to in autonomy.
The big tell is going to come next year. David Risher brought it up on the Lyft earnings call. In 2025, they're going to operate in Atlanta, and in Q1, they're going to disclose where that's going to go. Currently, May Mobility is operating fixed route in Peachtree's Corners. If they run in Buckhead or downtown Atlanta with no fixed routes, that's a different story. I'm waiting to see in Q1 what it's looking like and if May Mobility's technology has matured enough to the point where it is not going fixed routes.
So it sounds like you're pretty optimistic about May Mobility. I think the investors that we deal with, because their name came up obviously with Lyft reporting their earnings. You and I have talked about like, okay, Lyft, they need to get something on the tape. Autonomy wise, they had 3 announcements: Mobileye, Nexar, May Mobility. May Mobility just didn't seem like as impressive as people wanting them to do something with Waymo or Zoox, like some of the higher brand names, larger brand name and scale opportunities that exist. So, I mean, to me, it was like, and let's go to the other 2, Nexar. I mean, it's just, you're collecting information. It's camera. Is it really an autonomy partnership? I suppose. And Mobileye, where is Mobileye? I mean, they have level 2 cars, and you're saying sometime in the future, but not exclusive. If a Mobileye-enabled car gets to level 4, it's going to be on our platform. Like, I don't even know what that is in terms of an announcement. So, look, notwithstanding the stock's up 25% on what's going on in their business, not necessarily on these announcements. Investors are still hungry for, no offense to these 3 companies, but a more tangible autonomy strategy and announcements by Lyft.
What you said, what I said earlier, was about Toyota was a hodgepodge. This is a hodgepodge. I don't see how all these pieces make fundamental sense together. I know Edwin Olson, the founder and CEO of May Mobility, personally. Don't underestimate Edwin from a technical perspective. I just don't know if their technology is ready to go on a big Lyft network. That's why I want to wait to Q1 25 so we can actually see what the ODD is. And at that point, you and I will go down to Atlanta, we'll go for a ride, and then we'll share with our listeners and viewers an opinion on that. When I look at this from a Lyft, and I'm not a Lyft shareholder, but from a shareholder perspective, you're right, I want the big brand. And as an Amazon shareholder, you sit there and you think, what is wrong with Amazon? What is wrong with Zoox? You have David Risher clearly here wanting to go into autonomy. You have Amazon Zoox clearly needing an autonomy partner. What's not connecting the dots? And if you listen to Amazon's Q3 2024 earnings call, you read the transcript, you look at the statements that were put out. Mr. Andy Jassy did not make one statement about Zoox. Why? Another quarter, no statement. I'm going to continue to harp on that because I think it's very important. If Lyft came out and announced Zoox as a partner, then I think we're having a different conversation. And perhaps, and this is no disrespect to Ed, was this the only company left that Lyft could do a deal with?
It's perplexing to me. Again, if I'm Waymo and I'm going this route, I want to do it with multiple players. Flipping to Zoox, if I'm planning to do this, I'll do it with multiple players. Obviously, you want to try and knock down Uber first because they're the market share leader. But you'd want to And by the way, if your long-term strategy at Amazon, Zoox, is like a Tesla type strategy, which is I'm going to be the guy in the market with my own app, I'm not partnering with anyone. Notwithstanding all the near-term challenges that I fully appreciate exist in terms of having to use one app. There are other apps out there that someone says, like, look, if I want a high quality ride, I'm gonna switch over to this company's app. It gives me a higher quality ride, and I'm willing to wait 9 minutes or 14 minutes. And in terms of those that say, oh, you're never gonna get the scale for that busy Friday night, you know what? I actually push back on that, because in order to get the full return on a car, it doesn't have to be in motion at all times. If you have a car sitting in inventory for some of those peak times that exist, especially if it's a specialty product that someone's willing to wait for or is willing to have multiple apps, then you're still utilizing that car more than the average consumer is. And if your costs are aligned, you can still get a return on that. Obviously, the utilization can't be super low, but there's not this like, hey, if it's not being used 24/7, you're not going to get a return on it. I just reject that thesis as something that can kill the concept that a fleet of autonomy cars might actually exist without Uber and Lyft at some point in the future. But let's get back to Zoox. Even if that's your long-term plan, like, why not at least partner with them now? Because we both agree that you need Lyft and Uber now, I think, to drive some low, especially if you're not Waymo. You need Uber and Lyft to drive you some incremental volumes. But then 3 years from now, if your scale gets up and you can do it, then fine, do it on your own. Like, I don't think there's anything. And by the way, there are investors that are already even though we had this debate, I think in episode 2, that are exiting Uber because yes, we all know that Waymo is not replacing Uber tomorrow, but it's that overhang that can exist and the risk of them basically getting to that point at some point in the future.
What Zoox needs, what Zoox does not have, they need butts and seats. Lyft can deliver butts and seats. It gives an option because the way that Zoox is messaging and controlling the narrative, and there is no narrative to control. There's no interest, there's no hype, there's no buzz. If you look at, you cover this with Lightshed a lot. Apple, there's every time a product comes through, well, there used to be, buzz, 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 buzz. A lot of excitement leading up to it. There's no excitement leading up to the Zoox launches. Wah, wah.
I don't know if I agree with that or disagree, but it's a funky car. It's a toaster. I like the toaster. You don't like the toaster. If someone in San Francisco sees this toaster going by, you don't think they're going to say, like, what the hell was that? They'll look on the side, maybe they'll QR code it, download the app, and like, let me get my. I think it's
a novelty then.
I mean, that is the argument that I've seen people make about. Actually, I think Risher said that on his call this week, talking about AV, saying like, oh, it's just tourists and it's novelty, and Waymo's not really. He didn't. I'm over dramatizing what he said. Like, he wasn't this nasty, but he was basically saying like, AV is not a real thing. We look at San Francisco as a much bigger market, and the share isn't that big of a deal. Whatever. Things start as novelties and then they catch on and there's demand for them, which I think is the case in Waymo. So I would just push back and say Zoox does have the opportunity, but they got to get some vehicles on the road, put up some billboards, get some early users.
Waymo is a utility. It's not a novelty, it's a utility. And it's a consistent experience. That's what it is. It is a utility, not a novelty item.
I agree with you. And anecdotally, there's many people in San Francisco that I talk to that use it on a regular basis. But my point is, I think Zoox can get there. They just need to get cars on the road. They need to get some wait time down and some level of awareness. But the San Francisco populace is relatively smart. I'm sure they're going to figure it out if the product's available and it's working.
But Vegas, you do two things. This is not an adult program. You do two things in Vegas. You gamble and you drink. Is a drunk person on the strip going to try and download the Zoox app to get a ride? No, the drunk person on the strip, they already have the Uber app or the Lyft app. They get in there and, okay, it's cool. This is neat.
The drunk person is going to say, that toaster oven's so cool. I want to get in that thing.
That's if they could stand up straight. It's Vegas after all. Yes, if you look at successes in Vegas, Motional had a lot of success in Vegas. They were the first autonomous vehicle company in history to pass 100,000 paid rides. They were, going back to your theory, they were fixed routes. So if you would go from the Wynn Casino to Caesars to Mandalay, you couldn't go to the Tiki Bar. Very disappointed in that. Fixed routes, but it worked. And the interesting thing is, I'm going to go down into policy weeds here. Every time you enter the casino, you have to have an agreement with that casino to put your autonomous vehicle on that. That's one of the hardest parts of deploying in Las Vegas, is getting a contract with each one of those casinos to operate it. And then you have to go through the pickup and drop off of where you're going to pick up and drop off. Okay, so you're going to do the West store, you're going to do the East store. That gets all the complications. Motional had that all figured out. Zoox has been working on that for years. And then the question is, for a casino, does the Zoox mobile, the toaster, become a tourist attraction? And what benefits is that? Then, because I just experienced this, the union pushes back. And boy, they fight hard in Vegas. The culinary union, you don't want to fight with them. I just fought with them this week. I threw in the towel because with their demands. Does the taxi cab, do they push back? Do you get some sort of union pushback here?
Grayson, that just brings us back to the original topic in terms of the friction that exists in the market and how regulatory wise, and I guess now you're adding unions and the regulatory framework that can improve that. I mean, I just think in Vegas, as an example, you had Elon with the Boring Company digging a big hole. He kind of figured it out. They're sending Teslas through there. Yes, it's point to point, but he figured out whatever he needed to do in that market. And now the guys is in an incredibly critical position with the government that, I mean, if you look at the origin of it, it kind of went back to stuff that's related to EV and AV.
The Biden administration made a devastating calculation when they caved to union demands and excluded Elon Musk and Tesla from the 2021 White House EV Summit. If you look at the race from what happened 2 days ago, going back to 2021, Elon Musk was a Democrat. Don't forget, Mr. Musk voted for Biden. Mr. Musk voted for President Obama. He was a Democrat. They snubbed him. Then you start to see his political leanings changing. Mr. Musk goes on and buys Twitter, rebrands it X. Was that political calculation to give into Sean Fain United Auto Workers Union? Did that cost the Democrats the election? I can make a case here that it has. And did that spin up the America PAC and Elon Political Incorporated? Good. They snubbed him, and everything changed from that moment.
And beyond that, if it was in fact the unions that were influencing Biden's decision to snub Elon at that event, because I think many people have talked about that as kind of a turning point. I think Elon himself has. Is that going to come back to bite the unions in the ass by the fact that Elon's going to drive for a national framework that, getting back to your example with Zoox in Vegas or whatever it is, that's going to reduce the friction, reduce the influence that a lot of these organizations have to enable autonomy?
The unions made a calculated error that backfired. Plain and simple, backfired. They're going to go against the National Labor Board. Mr. Musk is a union buster, yada, yada, yada. Plain and simple, the American public voted, and they voted overwhelmingly. They want to go in a different direction. So if you really get down to the nitty gritty, you know what? Do you know why the union doesn't like autonomy? I actually found out. I actually got to speak to a union member. There is one very simple reason, and it all comes down to one thing. What do you think it is?
Lost jobs.
No. That's what they want you to think. That's what they want you to think. Do you know what it comes down to? Money. MONEY. Dues. They need to support the pension fund. If autonomy scales, and it will scale, the Teamster and the union pension funds will become insolvable. It is all about the money. It's not about the jobs. It's about the dues to support the pension fund.
We had it with the actors. We had it with the ports in New Jersey and I guess New York. It's clear that's what they want to do, but you can't really, it's difficult, I think, to hold back technology. And there's certainly obviously plenty of studies in cities that have embraced technology and the overall jobs that are created and the economic growth that is created in those markets. It's on net certainly beneficial. There's also just emotion in this now, even as it relates that I'm seeing, having just done this podcast with you for, I don't know how many episodes we're up to, 7, 8, hopefully on our way to hundreds, thousands.
I want to take the Falcon 9 rocket to Mars and go up into the sky.
and do the podcast from there. I've done this a long time, and I've dealt with a lot of what I would call religious zealot stocks over the years. And look, there's no doubt that there's people on the Tesla side of things that are zealous in their belief in what Elon can achieve and with undying support. But on the opposite side, I'm very surprised by this, they're never going to get there. These are the smartest people, and they are smart people that are saying this, but this just discounting any probability of Elon's approach to autonomy. Have you seen this? Have you looked at this thing? Have you looked at this? Yes, I've looked at all these things. Yeah, I'm not saying that, it's happening tomorrow, but to reiterate what I've said on this podcast many times, I've seen those same doubts on other companies, but specifically with Elon and Starlink. And I'm sure, I haven't followed the EV part of it, but I'm sure Tesla had the same type of doubters over the years. So, to the extent that these people have had influence either on regulations locally, nationally, vendors, whoever, to allowing partnerships, even to allowing Elon to move forward, now he's in a position to kind of clear those decks and I think move things forward regardless of what people think. And I think, maybe there was some friction in his ability to move that ball forward because of this kind of anti-Elon religion that exists to a certain extent in the market. So look, all I can say is I'm going to say it again on this podcast. I'm no Elon bull. I know, Grayson, you specifically get attacked a lot as this Tesla. I don't find you that way, and I watch a lot of people. I follow a lot of people that I think are like that. But look, I am not fully convinced, but I'm not also just going to say no, it's not going to happen. And then continue to kind of pull the thread. Please continue to provide that listener feedback. I definitely want to hear it and certainly pursue any new concepts that people have on why one company will be successful or not.
I agree with Walt. We thank you for your feedback. Trolls Incorporated. If you're going to troll, please at least wait until a minute after the thing goes, pretending to watch this whole podcast before you spit out your nonsense.
It's not nonsense. It's constructive feedback in many cases. Maybe not to you.
Not to me. It's just it's a double-edged sword. I'll leave it at that. If you look at the way that the industry is evolving, the autonomous vehicle industry has got a big problem. The problem's name's Elon Musk. And you did it to yourselves. I've been involved with several associations, committees, boards, where Tesla wanted to join. Everybody locks arms, says no. I will say for the record, I did not have a vote in any of these says, and I always felt that we should be inclusive and welcoming to Tesla, and there are public statements I've made throughout the years that backs this up. The industry blocked it. The autonomous vehicle industry didn't want nothing to do with Tesla, wouldn't do it. They listened to Ed Niedermeyer rant and rave about how Elon's a bad boogeyman. And guess what happened? And I'm going to say it. Daddy's home. Okay? He's back. And he's in charge, and now you've got to go kiss the ring. He's the pontiff. He is now the Pope of autonomy. You have to go kiss the ring. And the autonomous vehicle industry has to get on their knees, and they're going to have to beg for his forgiveness for what they did to Tesla, because he's in charge. And the whole dynamic is going to change.
But what are they begging for, though?
He has the most unfiltered access to the President of the United States. One of his key things that Mr. Musk has said publicly, he wants a national framework, and I can tell you, having spoken to the incoming administration, autonomy is a big priority. The days of Alphabet and Waymo playing their trickery with lobbyists and all this, they're over. Elon doesn't need you. You can't buy the world's richest man. He's going to get what he wants. They have to figure out a compromise of how they're going to work with Mr. Musk. And the industry made that crucial error, and it's time for a reboot. Now I sound like I'm on the Harris campaign. It's time for a reboot. And the industry really has to reboot their internal relations and stop playing these war games that are funny to hurt one another. There's a new boss. Daddy's home.
I think I'm going to agree with you and disagree with you. Let's start with the disagreement, meaning that let's start with the agreement. I mean, Elon certainly is the type of person that, he could, what you're evoking is like, now we're in, let's stick it to, not really the best way to do things, but I think Elon could technically be considered a person that does that type of stuff. I don't even know if it should matter to some of these companies, because like I was saying earlier, unless he's very specific in what the influence that he has in how the national framework is constructed, which I'm sure everyone's freaking out about. But generally speaking, I think he's just going to move the ball forward for the benefit of the entire industry. Could there be elements of that will hurt certain people that have snubbed him and not included him in maybe some of these industry discussions that you're referring to in the past? Sure. Should they be worried about that? Sure. Should they try and reach out? Yeah. I mean, look, Twitter is filled with like people congratulating Trump on the election. Like I just saw Bezos start to follow Trump on Twitter, and we know his recent history and the things that he's done with his various companies. But at the end of the day, Elon's got a lot of irons in the fire. And ultimately, it's probably going to help a lot of these people within the industry rather than hurt them. So maybe don't be too afraid.
I can't tell you how many phone calls I got from panicked people today. One person said they're depressed. I said, get over the depression. It's a fact. President Trump is back. So I had to school this person there. No crying memes. I had to give it to him straight. Then I got another call from another person who is dissecting, this is like surgeon level, dissecting Mr. Musk's comments on the Q3 earnings call about what he means and trying to dissect it. It's going to a fanatical level how worried they are, because they iced him. They have no relationships. There is no bridge between Tesla and the autonomous vehicle industry. They iced them. And that's a very crucial mistake. And perhaps the industry is going to learn a lesson as they build and mend fences. And we know that a lot's changing. Every week, autonomy just keeps getting more fun, I'll say. I think it gets great. I'm running Autonomy Times, autonomytimes.com now. We're updating it 4 to 5, 6 times a day with new news. We ran through the gauntlet of earnings season. Well, what do we have on deck over the next week that we need to be on the lookout for?
Well, Instacart was one that I think touches into this a little bit, but SoftBank reports this week. And when we get to this debate of what I'm just going to call end-to-end, I know it's oversimplifying it, versus some of the other approaches, SoftBank's a big backer. Maybe they'll provide some updates in terms of their views on that market, or, what they plan on doing further, but that's our possibilities for this week. And of course, Grayson, the Trump people are obviously gearing up. So details may start to emerge out of the transition team in terms of which way they're going to go and where a lot of this stuff will end up on the priority list.
And we'll continue to cover it here on Autonomy Markets. I'll be watching on SoftBank and their presentation. Do they make a mention of Wave, and do they make a mention of Stack AV? I will say historically for the last quarter, they did mention both companies and presentation materials. Be looking for that, and we'll discuss SoftBank next week, because Massa's Massa. You never know what Massa's going to do. he can just take out the bazooka and buy an AV company, and there's one currently for sale, and we'll see what Massa does next week and over the coming weeks. The future is bright, the future is autonomous, the future is a national autonomous vehicle framework. Walt, until next week.